panel, Investing in Discovery, or as I like to think of it, seriously, why do they keep giving all the money to the photo sharing apps? We're going to bring up a really great panel of investors right now. Moderating, we have Dylan Tweney, the executive editor of VentureBeat, Jamison, partner at BlueRun Ventures, Aydin Senkut, the founder of Felicis Ventures, Josh Elman, principal at Greylock Partners, and Christina Brodbeck, co-founder and angel investor at the Icebreak. Guys, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Casey. I think we are all in the order that he introduced us, so it'll be easy for you guys to keep us straight. No discovery needed. I'm going to kick things off, and we'd like to keep this kind of like jumping and lively because there are a lot of us, and we've got 25 minutes, so hopefully you won't get too bored. I'm going to kick this off with Paul Graham's note that he sent to Y Combinator companies a couple days ago. Got covered yesterday. Basically, he said the Facebook IPO has been, he was having dinner with some investor, unnamed investor, but the Facebook IPO has put a damper on valuations. And his message to his companies was basically, look out, tougher times are ahead, your valuations are going to be down and don't need money. Not very helpful advice, but prudent perhaps. So I guess my question is he on the ball? Is the Facebook IPO and other social media IPOs, is that putting a damper on social discovery investing?
So maybe I'll take a shot at this. I think it's very simple. We can talk about this for a whole day, but I think the message is, at least in the public markets, is really clear. We don't really care how cool or famous your company is. If you don't have the business fundamentals, we're not going to give you the valuation that you want. I also don't think that it's a terrible outcome for a company to be valued at $60 billion. So let's not kid ourselves. But I think
so it's still doing pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is sound advice that, especially when you look at things like Instagram's $1 billion acquisition, I'm not saying it's not a valuable company, but for a company with 50 million users, for them to get $1 billion, I think everybody's kind of thinking, oh, my company should be worth X. If that's worth, Y. There's a lot of that going around, and I think that's definitely going to be threatened with what's going on in the market, and I think this will be used as an excuse to bring valuations at least to a reasonable level, or at least tied to some metric of business performance.
So you guys are happy
The thing
about
that's a little weird is, I agree with everything Aydin's saying, but what I think is a little weird is you're talking about this behemoth of a company called Facebook, and we're talking about it in the context of companies that are basically seed-level companies. And the gulf between that is so high. And I do think that on the seed-level investments, in terms of companies coming out for seed rounds and some of the caps, those have really drifted up. And you were quoted talking about that as well, I think recently, Aydin, in a Wall Street Journal article. And so these things are, I think it's a good thing to throw out there, which is just like, look, the momentum in the market is exciting. It's great to see the IPO window open. But don't be confused. When you're an early stage company, the path that you have to go to get to an exit is one that's long and hard and arduous. And don't be confused that because the IPO window's open, that now startups are suddenly easy to build, because they're not.
So in terms of social discovery, though, what are you excited about? I mean, Aydin, you were saying there are fundamental businesses that are doing okay. I mean, LinkedIn might be a good example. Like, the market still seem to like LinkedIn okay. I don't know what effect last night's password hack is having. By the way, you should change your LinkedIn password if you haven't already. But what do you guys look for? I mean, what's a good social discovery business?
I mean, I think I would start this by saying, LinkedIn's a 9-year-old company, Facebook's 8 years old, and it takes them a really long time to get to these kind of big behemoth companies. And so, what we're looking for are the kind of companies coming out today that are leveraging the fact that everybody has a computer in their pocket. They have ways to share what they're doing with other people in faster and more viral ways than ever before, for what will be the behaviors that 8 or 9 years from now we'll be talking about in exactly the same way we're talking about LinkedIn and Facebook. It's, hey, did you realize that now you can see all the people around you and learn more about them? Or did you realize you can find out all the great business deals, right around you that'll help you make better decisions on parking or where you're going to eat or anything else? And so we're really looking for these people that are forming companies today that are thinking about 8 or 9 years, what can I look like to be the next LinkedIn or Facebook and have that big sea change of behavior?
Well, let's talk, the thing is, though, there are a couple examples of companies that have come out very fast from left field, like Instagram, just a couple of years. But also Pinterest. I mean, in the last years, that's arguably a very powerful engine of social discovery, and they discovered a niche that no one else had. So where'd that come from?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I really like about Pinterest is I think a lot of social discovery focuses on how do you meet other people, but I think there needs to be a focus on how do you discover content based off of social interactions. And I think Pinterest did that really well because you are connecting people, but it's based off of the content, what you're sharing.
So I think I have one important insight for this panel, and I just want to get that out now. I've been investing in social discovery for 7 years, and I probably have 12 years background in it because before Google, I was at Silicon Graphics, and I did data mining, data visualization. The big insight that I have is very similar to big data. It is not a separate market. I think social discovery now is an integral part of a lot of great companies. The same way big data, in my opinion, is not a separate market. It's an important element of every successful company today. So when you look at Pinterest, yes, you can call it a social discovery company, but in reality, it's a company that I think applies to the human need of like having collections and interests. So I invested in 2 companies early on, one called Lumia, the other one called Rich Relevance. I think Rich Relevance, to my knowledge, I believe Greylock is in it too, is one of the few companies that has tried and succeeded to make a business out of being a social discovery tool maker as a standalone. And Lumia scaled to a certain level and didn't make it. And I learned valuable lesson from that is that when you look at the most successful social discovery company out there, can anybody guess what it is? In my opinion, it's Amazon. And why is it successful? Because it's not a standalone tool. It's most valuable when it's combined with a company that has a huge user base, when actually there's a lot of great clean data that's coming into it, and it could be used to something really, really valuable for the end customers. And you know the reason why it works so well is the same reason Apple works so well. It's like magic. You don't even know that it's working in the background. It just works.
So it's almost an extension of personalization or recommendation engines, right? Which make use of user behavior to kind of tie you to...
That's my...
Yeah, okay.
I think one of the nice things about that is you avoid the whole graveyard problem because you're building on top of a network which already has a good user base. And I know a lot of, especially people meeting other people, social discovery, that tends to be a problem initially.
So would you say do you actually avoid companies that are explicitly aimed at social discovery? You know what I'm saying? Is it?
No, I mean, I think there are some out there that'll say, look, all the social you need has been done because you have a thing called Facebook, you have a thing called LinkedIn. Facebook's for home, LinkedIn's for business. And I think that's ridiculous.
Airtime's approach, right?
Yeah, but I think that's crazy because I think of that as like thinking that in the 1980s when we had 3 television channels, that was all the TV you needed. And granted, and I've written about this, when CNN came online, many people said, that's stupid. Who needs 24 hours of news? Or who needs 24 hours of sports? How will that ever work? Well, clearly, those entrepreneurs that created those businesses were right. There was tremendous demand as pipes got broader and fatter into homes for all these crazy cable channels. In the same way, how I share with you on Facebook is totally different from how I talk on Twitter or Path or Food Spotting or any number of other social discovery tools. And I believe the market is going to, in the same way, in 10 years, we'll be saying, wow, there are hundreds of channels of social discovery, social media tools that people interact with differently versus just the big 3 you have today.
And I would just add that I actually think we're not really reinventing human behavior. We're just giving brand new ways and brand new tools to actually do the same things we used to. And if you think 20, 30 years ago, the way you got your information on news was from a newspaper. The way you got information on your friends and family was from calling them up or, annual Christmas letters. The way you got your information from like what kind of interesting content or design ideas or travel ideas was from reading magazines like Sunset or Home and Garden or Travel and Leisure. And today, all we're doing is we're building these new tools that allow people to share and communicate information much faster and much more broadly. And so newspapers become Twitter. Facebook becomes Family and Friends, the annual Christmas letter. Pinterest replaces all those magazines. And it's just much faster and much speedier. And so if you can think about other human behaviors that we've always done, but that we aren't really finding new ways to do online yet, there's great opportunities to figure out how to build networks and service those.
Yeah, there is, just to add or enhance that a little bit, I do think there are opportunities that are being created with the sensors or the photos or whatever happens that enables a ubiquity that extends those scenarios you're describing in new ways. So one of our portfolio companies is a company called Banjo, which is a social discovery company that will sort of highlight when people are nearby. And they'll say, Aydin's in the same room with you. If I don't know Aydin's there, that's something that can be very useful and interesting to me. And it's very helpful. And the old analog way of doing it really didn't exist before, unless you were like in an... I worked in Japan for a while, and you'd have these little offices where people would sign in, so you could see a board of like who's here. But that was pretty niche.
So how do you deal with the creep factor in that? I mean, there's a certain amount of like who's around me kind of like, well, this is a little odd. I mean,
but I think when Facebook was starting at Harvard, I think there are great, well-documented IM trails of Mark Zuckerberg and other early guys saying, well, isn't it crazy that people are giving us all this data? And certainly privacy concerns and settings are ones we'll have to work through.
Cackling and rubbing their hands.
I mean, I worked at LinkedIn in the early days, and everybody would say, I don't want to put my profile online. I'm not looking for a job. Why would I have an online resume? I worked at Facebook when we were launching Facebook Connect, and everybody was like, I don't want to give all my data to some other website and actually connect that up. But
geographic data is different, right? I mean, if I'm in this bar and I'm a female and I'm
so
right?
everything's different because today we're always scared, but the real entrepreneurs and the kind of guys who like to back see a world 5-6 years out when we start to realize these are really normal behaviors, and that if the world works this way, it's more open, it's more transparent, we're getting all this value. And so we're really just looking for those kind of opportunities where people can sort of get through those sort of privacy scares. I think privacy scares are one of the, as long as you're always doing it in a way that we're trying to drive user value, helps you know that you're sort of on the right track, but you need to make sure you're being really careful and consistent with people and never break their trust.
So I want to touch on another topic. I think maybe I have 2 insights to share, and that is, as a former Google guy, there's always this dynamic. Is it search? Is it discovery? Is discovery going to replace search? And one of the things that I wanted to touch is that for the last few years, we had this thing, like I told in my team, that I'm looking for companies that have a Pandora-like experience. In fact, we almost did Zeit. We were looking at Zeit and Pulse, and I'm a little bummed that our panel is in the beginning of the day, because I think it would have been a lot of fun to do it at the end of the day after all those guys spoke, because I think there are some incredible founders that are going to speak. So I think that is really important, is kind of how do you have an experience from the get-go that is meaningful. That's one of the reasons why I made the Amazon comment, because with mass, it can be extremely meaningful right away. That's what happened to friend feed. Within Facebook, it was much more meaningful. To get that mass is really difficult. And I love the Zeit experience of, like Pandora, you just type in your Twitter username, not even the password, and you have a personalized letter. On the search to discovery thing, can we touch this? I think it's a really interesting topic. So I think when I started at Google, search was really great because discovery was being not as useful, and there was enough information that Google made it meaningful and accessible. I feel a decade later, curation is becoming really important, and I don't think necessarily search is going to go away. I think that's the thing that people want to pit search against discovery, is that there is so many things to know, so many things to discover, and so little time between tweeting and Facebook and LinkedIn and 15 other tools that we use. We just want to be surprised. You have 15 minutes at night, you're in bed, you're on your iPad. What is the first thing that you want? You want to see beautiful, cool things. You want to be surprised by things you didn't know. And the idea is, how can you search for something if you don't know what to search for it? Right? So that's the thing. That's the reason why social discovery is so cool. We want to be surprised with other things that we didn't know, other stuff that we want to find out, but we just didn't know what to look for, and it's beautiful for it to be surfaced to us.
I worry that search has actually become a lot less relevant in the next 10 years. I think it's going to feel a lot more like the command line. When you actually have to pull out your keyboard and start typing something in to go find it, you're going to feel like you've lost, because all the different ways that you have 20 or 40 apps on your phone where you just push a little button and it shows you the latest news on Twitter or the latest pictures on Instagram.
Let's make a bet. Let's make a bet. Let's put it this
I think
way.
there's always going to be a place for self-directed. I want to find X. I'm looking for a bike. That with these.
I agree.
Let's
I just
add
think
the
it's going to
market
be much further down
capitalization
the
of
stream.
companies that do search. And by the way, I'm going to put Apple in there, because you might not think of Siri as search, but Siri is search.
It is, yeah.
They're just shifting it to a different level. And I'm happy to bet with you on anything, for anything, anytime, that search is not going to go away and it's not going to be less valuable. It's not going to be less valuable.
I kind of want to
Christina.
go back to that creep factor that we were talking about before, sorry. But as a female, actually, that really is a concern, but I think there's smart ways that you can do it. So if you just show my location on a map, that creeps me out, right? But there's services like Aloha, which say, this person is nearby, and it doesn't give your specific location. So I think there's ways that you can be vague about it that aren't creepy.
Okay. I want to touch on something. I want to tease something apart here. It looks like we've got 10 minutes. By the way, I think you can tweet questions to us if you want to, using the tag GlimpseConf. If I'm not, yes, GlimpseConf, hashtag GlimpseConf. I want to tease something apart here, because you guys are talking about two, I think, different things and kind of lumping them together. One is, as a user, as a consumer, I may want to find things. I may want to know what my friends are up to. I may want friends to recommend things to me. But there's another side of discovery, which is as merchants or content producers or retailers, we want to be able to kind of SEO the social discovery process. We want to be able to get our products in front of these people. And I'm wondering, like, is it possible to harmonize these two things? Is there more of an emphasis on one than on the other? I mean, I always feel kind of when I hear new social discovery tools, there's always kind of a suspicion in my mind, like, well, maybe this is just a calculated way to get me and my friends to turn into a recommendation engine to help sell more crap to me that I don't really need. I don't know if I'm saying this very clearly, but do you see what I'm getting at? Like, there's sort of two sides. How do you optimize?
So what's in it for the business is basically what you're asking?
Well, I guess I'm saying it's very obvious what the business incentive is for retailers or content producers. So, is there really a consumer need for this kind of thing?
Well, I mean, I think users vote with their fingertips and their usage and their engagement. If they find a product that's useful and valuable and interesting for them, they're going to be spending time. And those services that get the critical mass of users and get the critical mass of engagement and have the ability to close loop with merchants are ones that I think do really well. So Pinterest is a really interesting example of not only doing some of the things that have been talked about earlier about providing this great curation, photo-oriented layer of the web, but there's a really natural way that you can imagine e-commerce happening. Another company that Aydin and I are both investors in is one called Food Spotting, which is interesting in the sense that people are taking and submitting and sharing interest about the food they're most interested in. So I may follow a certain restaurant or declare my love for a certain type of food. Well, that's a tremendously useful set of data on top of location to provide to a restaurant merchant over time.
But do users think of this as a social discovery tool, or do they think of these like Pinterest and Food Spotting? And
I don't think
do they think of it as just like I'm sharing
like a word we
cool
use
stuff
here at a conference. Users, I don't ever think of like any of these services as like, oh, I'm going to go discover some social. That's just not the way human beings act. This is just a word for marketing people.
You think of it as media. You used to go and read your newspaper and your magazines and watch the TV, and instead you're getting the magazine programmed by your friends or people that you're interested in. You're getting the news programmed by your friends. And so you're spending all of your time just consuming that same information in this brand new form. I think what we're going to see is that advertisers used to do interruptive commercials because that's what worked, or they used to do newspaper ads or inserts. And now they're going to be doing inserts into this new media. And I think we're going to see these native forms of advertising. I think Twitter's doing an amazing job launching their promoted products. I mean, we spent a lot of time figuring out what ads were going to work and feel like within Twitter, but I think they're just doing this great job being just another unit as part of the stream that advertisers get a chance to be part of that same media.
I'm going to take a different spin on it. What are the two most valuable things that we have? Time and insight. So the same point that I made, I think applies, is that for social discovery to be meaningful on both ends, it just has to work, and it has to work really well, right? So that's the reason why, again, I don't want to single out companies, but if a program like Zeit can surprise me with like 5-second entry with a Twitter name and say, here, I'm going to show you 5 articles that you didn't even know you could look like this blog. It shows me stuff. I didn't even know about that blog and some new insight. First of all, I feel like, great, I'm informed. My time is not wasted. I'm surprised. That's the thing. We have much less time, and we want to have much more insight. So I think, the other way to look at it.
So surprise and delight is, it's an amazing experience. I'm going to come back and do it.
Here's a different way to look at it, right? So I think that the normal software analogy is you take 10 units of time to get 1 unit of insight, and social discovery could be a conduit for 1 unit of time to get 10 units of insight, or get it faster.
Okay. Christina.
Yeah, so I think if you keep the value proposition is very clear, as long as you always focus on filtering content that's relevant, then everything you do beyond that can work because you're providing value to the user.
Relevance then. Okay. We have a couple questions from the audience. We'll do this quickly because I think we have a little more than 5 minutes left yet. What social discovery investing opportunity is the one that got away for you? Which is the one that you wish you had invested in? Anyone want to take a crack at that?
So I'm brand new in venture capital. I've been doing it for about 9 months. So I can say I think Pinterest is the one that got away from a lot of people. I know that Ben and Paul had been working on this for many years and had gone in front of a ton of people and said, hey, look at this thing. People collect images and share images. And there are actually lots of women around the world and actually using it, and like the engagement rates are really high. But everybody got like why is there going to be a new social platform? I don't quite get it. And I think now we're all, I think every investor who isn't in Pinterest probably looks back and says, dope, that's one that I should have been in.
I will say that I think that got away from a lot of guys in particular. I was talking to an entrepreneur, Mariam Nafisi at Minted, and she said she had got interested in Pinterest early and made like 7 or 8 introductions to a bunch of different investors who were all guys, and they were all like, I don't see it.
I was actually going to turn the question around, because one of the things that shocked me walking into the room is I think this is the first panel. I'm looking at the audience, and there might be more women than men. So mental note, like when you hear back from Glimpse organizers, show up in panel and participate. Maybe we can learn from you, and you can tell us what company we should be looking into next, rather than thinking about the ones we missed.
Okay.
I think Pinterest also for me. So I got an intro to Pinterest, and it happened at a time where I had just written an article about women in investing. So I got all of these floods of, hey, you should invest in this. It's oriented towards women, and I couldn't filter anything out of that group. But yeah, it's one of those things. I don't think it's just dependent on like, oh, is a man seeing it or women seeing it?
Yeah, no, I think it surprised a lot of people actually. Okay, what areas of social discovery do you see as a fad? Is there something overhyped right now? Photo filtering and sharing? That's an easy one. I'm going to answer that. That'll be my answer.
Well, you answered that question. Should we move on to the next?
All right, I have a question for Aydin. Will the way that we interact with sports change in the next 10 years? I assume that has a relevance to an investment you've made, although I'm not sure what exactly that's referring to.
I don't know. I mean, I would love to make a sports-related investment. I don't think I have one unless I do, and you guys can remind me. I don't know. Look, I mean, I kind of articulated the thing. I would love to see something like, again, it's like Pandora, it's like Zide. I'm a huge sports fan. I think my biggest difficulty is I haven't grown up in the US. The sports that I like is different. I like Formula One. I like biking. I'm not into baseball. I don't get baseball. I'm trying to get into American football. So maybe there is something that can help me look, here's like stuff that's happening where I feel like at least I'm a little bit more intelligent when I'm talking about it. I don't know. I mean...
I actually need that too. I grew up in America, but not in a sports-loving family at all. And I find that I actually really enjoy watching baseball games or watching soccer games or watching, the Tour de France. But I have no clue what's going on. So I need something to help me discover the cool events and
there's no question in my mind that there's
on.
like a social layer within the sports watching experience and cheering for, because there's such an interest-based discussion around it. It drives and to sort of build on what Josh said earlier, this is, if you think of all this stuff as just media reinvented, well, what's one of the most profitable segments in media? It's sports. So there's going to be this whole social layer around sports. The challenge I have there is there going to be a large behemoth independent company that does that social layer, or is it going to be some small company that comes along and then gets picked off by Universal or ESPN or somebody like that before it really reaches critical mass? That, to me, is, I think, the big question.
I think one of the things I'm currently obsessed is, so there's all these services that get me to meet other people, but they have to be on the service. But I'm already meeting lots of people every single day. Like there's people in this room, but what do I talk about with them, right? So giving me content to talk about with the people that I'm already meeting where I might not necessarily have too much data on them ahead of time.
I think Airtime actually does that in an interesting way. I don't, haven't messed around with it very much, but it sort of shows a cluster of tags of things that you're interested in and the person that you're talking with is interested in, so you can find things to talk about. Kind of clever, actually. There may be room to do that in other platforms as well. So, all right, I'm going to ask a general question. If I'm an entrepreneur, how do I get your attention as an investor?
Well, I think a nice way to do it is come up and say hello. But I mean, in terms of, I think introducing yourself.
Physically?
Yeah,
like actually talking to you?
That definitely helps. I think as well.
Okay.
I mean, just sort of standing back. And I've actually studied this. I've got a set of analysis I've done where I've looked at every pitch that I've done that I've taken over the last 18 months and sort of scored them in terms of why did I say yes or why did I say no. And without doubt, the two most important factors are, outstanding team and, just behemoth market. Like those two are by far, those two things above everything else, to me at least, matter a whole lot. So to the extent to which you can talk in that language, that matters to me.
All right, Aydin?
I'm always happy to talk to you. I think the thing that would be most helpful is having some kind of reference or connection. Because if I don't know who you are, and it would be great to have some context. And the second thing is, If you can think of like a 30-second kind of pitch of something about the business that is interesting. I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs, I respect them. I want to be on a lot of these panels because I definitely love the interaction. But when I'm in the hallway and I'm meeting you, I don't have 10 minutes to really like listen to the whole thing. But if we can like at least agree on one thing that's interesting so that the conversation continues, and think of it as an appetizer, size inside or something that's intriguing, that would be really great. And I'm more than happy to follow up after that. And I'm a Senkut on Twitter.
Okay. Quickly, Josh and Christine.
I think one of the great things for all the great companies that they understand two things. One is how to build a great product, and then the second is how to really get the product in the hands of other people and how to really think about how it's going to get distribution. And I think I meet a ton of people who are great at showing me why their product's going to be super meaningful in the world, but kind of have deer in the headlights when we talk about distribution. And so I'd really encourage you to think very, very hard, because having users and having people actually engage with their product is the most important thing. And I'm really easy to find online. I'm Josh Elman on Twitter, and I'm happy to talk here too.
Yeah, you can either just come up to me, or the best way is probably go through an intro through one of the entrepreneurs I've already invested in, because I already respect them a lot. And I met Jellyfish Bloom on Twitter.
Okay, thanks everybody. Great conversation.